This is episode number 236 with landscape painter Kathleen Hudson.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. I'm Eric, and Happy New Year. I think this is our first podcast of the new year, and if not, I'm wrong. Okay. So we're going to start the new year out. We have a very positive person. You know, if you're a resolutions person, setting goals person, you will be really happy to know our guest today because she's like the most positive, happy person in the world and a brilliant painter. Her name is Kathleen Hudson. We'll get to her in a minute. I want to tell you that I'm all about goal setting and really understanding where I'm going. I'm not big on resolutions. I break them too quickly. Although I guess if I had a resolution, it would be that I'm going to stop spending so much time on social media and so much time watching television because I don't want all that negativity coming into my head. And, you know, if I watch the news, it's negativity. So I figure if anything really important happens, somebody will let me know. So I'm staying away from, I do a little social media, but I'm trying to stay away from the negative stuff because they've just gotten so old. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is that over the holidays, right before the new year, I put something together about goal setting and also about how to manage your business and hit your goals. One of them was on the Oil Painters of America newsletter. So if you go to their website and find their newsletters, you'll find it there. The other was a video that I did on Instagram, and you can find me at Eric Rhodes. So we want to help you wherever possible. Coming up after the interview, we're going to talk about some advice for art students who have recently graduated and how to become successful, which is a really big deal. And also a question about when is the right time and the wrong time to have a discussion about art galleries. That's in the Art Marketing Podcast. We are humbled to be number one in the FeedSpot list of painting podcasts for a second year in a row. And thank you for making that happen. Let's make it happen for 2023 at the end of the year too. So thank you for that. If you did not get a subscription for Hanukkah or Christmas or for a New Year's present to Plein Air Magazine, it's a must. You got to do it. Still time. And I got to tell you, my prices for printing just went up 30%. 30%. That's insane. But I have not yet raised the price of the magazine subscriptions, but I'm gonna. And so if you were to go ahead and get that done here in the next, say, 10 days, you probably will be locked in. So I think it's a good idea to get a tour. They've got a 20-year subscription. Just go to pleinairmagazine.com. And any day now, like hopefully like next podcast, we're going to announce our big celebrity guest who's coming to the 10th birthday bash of the Plein Air Convention. Yes, Plein Air Convention is 10 years old. It's going to be held in Denver, Colorado. Our guest will be there. We'll find out more about that soon, but you want to make sure to get a seat. The hotel is telling us they're like running out of hotel rooms and we're going to run out of seats. And when we had it in Denver before we canceled, we had 1,200 seats sold and we were pretty much sold out or close to sold out. So get it done pretty quickly. When we announce this guest, I'm guessing that it's going to sell out quickly. And by the way, this guest, if you are signed up for our VIP program, you will also be able to get your photo with this guest. And this is not someone that you would think would be coming to a Plein Air convention. And it's someone who is from, dare I say, Hollywood. Okay, that's enough on that. So sign up at pleinairconvention.com. And also just around the corner, just at the end of January, I have Watercolor Live. We have some of the 30 best watercolor artists in the world who are going to be teaching, and I'm blown away by what they're doing. It's going to be remarkable, and you can still join us. And we have a brand new video for people who are kind of like insecure about painting, or maybe you're feeling like you don't have the talent, or maybe you're a little embarrassed about your work, or you're not sure how to get to where you want to be. I put together a little video at the Watercolor Live site that will kind of help you through that, because we've discovered that there are two lies that we're telling ourselves that prevent us from getting good. And so I have a video about those two lies. So just go to watercolorlive.com and look at that video. It's brand new. It just went up yesterday or the day before. So you want to check that out. Now, my guest today is plein air artist Kathleen Hudson. Kathleen is a remarkable person. She was the winner. We got to know her. She was the winner of the plein air salon in 2017, I believe, for her painting Timberline Falls, which was remarkable. Best painting of the year for plein air painters, the way we look at it. And she won a $15,000 check and the cover of the magazine. And so she's our guest today. She's also a signature member of the Plein Air Painters of America, a fellow in the American Society, a marine artist, and truly a wonderful person. She lives in Colorado Springs, and so she's going to be at the Plein Air Convention. Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Well, I see the mountains in the background. Oops, I'm not allowed to refer to the video. Whoops. Well, I should tell people that we have a video version of this, and you can listen to audio or video. So, Kathleen, we've had you on before, but now that we're doing video and we're kind of going back to the most popular ones and getting them done again. Tell me what you've been up to lately. You recently moved to Colorado. What was that all about? And what's it like living in Colorado from Kentucky, being a plein air painter?
Yes. Well, I moved along with the family in June of 2021. So we've been here over a year now.
Okay.
And I've loved it. I grew up in Kentucky and then met my husband in Boston, Massachusetts, where I lived for 8 years, and then moved
Oh,
back to.
well, you were at Harvard. I forgot to mention that.
That's right. Yes, we met shortly after I graduated, and then when we started a family, we wanted to be back near my family in Kentucky, and his family in Ohio. So it made total sense to move back. And we ended up making the switch to Colorado because of his job. So we hadn't really been looking for a reason to move, but it just came up through his work. And I was thrilled at the idea of moving to the Rockies because I've done plein air events in the Rockies. I've traveled here as a small child and had such strong memories of being inspired by the landscape here. So
Yeah.
for me, it was no no hard thing to go move right to the foothills of the Rockies in Colorado Springs.
So I think you're a real inspiration for a lot of us, but especially for the young women who might be watching, because you're managing very effectively to juggle a fantastic career as an artist, which requires a lot of travel and a lot of other things. You're raising a couple of kids, and also dealing with, life as a married person. What's that like? How do you do that?
Yes, well, I think it's been helpful to do these plein air events because that's a way of giving me focused time where I can just paint. And to do that, I've really relied on a village. So my mother will travel in from Kentucky occasionally. My husband picks up obviously more slack than he would typically have to in terms of childcare whenever I'm out of town. And I do limit my events to about 5 or 6 a year.
Smart.
And so that way I can fly my mom or my mother-in-law out to stay with the kids and make sure that they are well taken care of. They actually look forward to it because my mom tends to do things like take
Give them
them.
sugar.
Yes, sugar, the zoo, different museums every day. They love it. So feels like a treat for them. So I don't think they miss out on anything when I'm gone. But that's been really helpful just because it's great practice for me on also making the most of my time because if any of you listening who have done one of these events knows that you really do have to put in a lot of hours in a limited amount of time, whether it's a week or shorter. And it does make you focus really hard on doing your best possible work. And so that it's almost like training. So when I come back and I have, hours in the studio while my daughter is in school, and my son is in public school in second grade now. When I come back into the studio, I can make the most of my time there too, because I know what I can accomplish in the space of a few hours. And if I can do it outside with all of the attendant challenges of painting on location and just the environmental stuff, then I can definitely do it inside the studio. So it's really helped me see what I'm capable of doing and work more efficiently.
What are
Um,
the aspects of running your business? What kind of time demands does that part of it take, which is beyond painting?
right, that's not the fun part. I think most artists probably feel that way. But what I found is I can, if I try to set up workshops and different my different calendar events, and have that in mind at the start of a year, then I can plan travel. I can try to minimize the amount of time I spend thinking about that throughout, a day or a week if I try to line those things up early. And then the day-to-day stuff like social media posting or um, newsletters, those I try as much as possible to schedule or automate. So for Instagram, for instance, and for Facebook, I use a service called Planoly where you can upload 30 to 60 posts in advance, and then they just post on a schedule, and that way I don't have to think about it. I mean, I'll get on and reply and talk to people when they comment, but i don't have to I don't have to set aside time each day to think about crafting a social media post or, creating that kind of content on the marketing end of the business, because
Yeah.
that's not the part that I enjoy. I'd rather focus more on painting and have the other be something that I do that kind of serves the purpose of getting my paintings out there in front of people, but not something that takes away from my studio time.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. We use one called Agorapulse,
Mhm.
which unfortunately is about $25,000 a
Oh,
year
wow.
now.
Yeah,
But
Planoly is nuts.
but we also are feeding, multiple sites.
Right.
We have full-time people who just do that. And but it's very efficient because, I will sit down oftentimes and just craft 8 or 10 posts and schedule them, and then it's out of the way. Now, I also
Mhm.
still post randomly, which is nice, and I'm sure you do too from time to
Mhm.
time. So, what's your best advice to someone who is kind of facing what you have faced, and a little inspiration for them?
Yes, well, I would say don't write yourself off just because you have more home commitments than some of the artists that you admire. Most of my career success has come since I had my first child in 2015. I only did my first plein air event in 2014, and that one wasn't juried. So my first juried event came when I was the mom of a 1-year old. So I would really encourage people to rely on whatever support networks you have, to also involve your children in the process. Last
Hmm.
January, a year ago, when the Omicron variant was running pretty rampant, we actually kept our 1 year, then she was 2, but our 2-year-old daughter home from daycare, because at that point she was still diagnosed with a heart problem that she was born with. and it has luckily since resolved. But we were worried, this heart problem is associated with higher risks. Whenever she got a virus, it was
Right.
something we had to monitor anytime she got a fever. So we just kept her home so that would be a lower risk for her. But it meant that I had to spend all of January, when I had all these painting deadlines, with her at home. So I just set her up in my studio with watercolors, and it was a mixed bag. I'm not going to pretend it was easy. She's much more demanding than my son is when it comes to more constant interaction. But she loved it, and I ended up finishing a couple paintings I needed to finish, and it worked out. It's more challenging for me now than it used to be, because my mom used to live 15 minutes from me, and now that's no longer the case after the move
You
to
can't just
Colorado.
drop them off.
Right. But yeah, so rely on those networks that you do have, and try to carve out time for painting. And try to, if you can manage some travel and even bringing your kids along, try to make some time commitments to events that get you out there with other artists, and ones that will expand your horizons a little bit, ones that will force you to create some of your best work. But no stress with that either, because it's um, plein air painting is fun. Doing these events should be fun. And I talk to people sometimes who feel stressed by them, and I don't think it serves a great purpose if somebody goes in to an event just feeling stressed.
Yeah.
But yeah, do things that really make you flourish in your art, and that's different for each person.
Well,
But
and I think it kind of goes down to listening to what you have to say is it kind of goes down to two things. One is mindset.
mhm,
Don't tell yourself that you have these limitations. Of course, you have
right.
to have a supportive community, supportive spouse or whatever. But also, it's the old airplane saying, right? You know, give yourself the oxygen before you help others.
Mhm,
You have to give oxygen to yourself. You have to take care of yourself. So many people put their lives on hold to take care of their kids and their husbands or family members, and they're not doing anything for themselves. And then they crash and burn much easier when they don't have any hope. But when you're doing something that you love, it makes things a
mhm.
lot better, I would think.
Well, that's very true, and it's a great example for my kids. There are times when I do feel a little guilty for being gone during, my son's basketball game, or I think I missed. Well, actually, I didn't end up. I had to cancel a trip last fall, but I was scheduled to be on a trip where I was going to miss my daughter's birthday, and that one was going to be hard.
Yeah.
But things like that, where I really, there are times when I don't feel great about being gone, but if I am able to balance it well, to make the most of my time at home, and then if I'm really selective about the travel that I do choose to do, then I come back and my kids love hearing stories. They love looking at photos of where I've been out in the field painting. They love it. They feel like they're experiencing it a little bit vicariously when I come back from Texas and have photos of all of these ranches with horses. They
And that will serve them long term.
love.
I've heard stories. I haven't experienced this personally, but I hear stories of people that I've interviewed who, their parents did things like that for them at young ages, and then they never were interested, and then all of a sudden they were. And
Mhm.
and I used to take my kids to museums and give them a pad of paper and say, find something you love and see if you can draw it. And I only did that to give myself some time to look at other paintings. And my kids still haven't, you know, migrated towards art, but I can see
Mhm.
it coming. And I think what you've done is remarkable. The other thing that I think you've done is remarkable is, I have the pleasure of getting to know a lot of artists and watching their careers and seeing how they develop. And maybe this is just me not seeing the struggle, but it seems like you made massive amounts of progress in a very short period of time, short being, 5 to 7 years, where sometimes it takes somebody 20 years to get to the level that you seem to have accomplished. Did you have a deliberate way of going about that that might be helpful for others to understand?
That's a good question. I do feel like things fell into place for me in large part because of the plein air salon in 2017. I mean, that was out of left field for me. But I did have years of painting experience under my belt before I even learned about plein air events, before I learned about plein air magazine, for instance. And
But
so,
you did take a big leap.
mhm.
I mean, you did a beautiful job. You were doing great work by the time you won the plein air salon. But to see where you are today, what is that, 5, 6 years later, I mean, you have made massive changes. You were good, but you're so much better now.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I try to make each painting my best one yet, and that's not true of small studies. I'm talking about more the studio work, but I do like to challenge myself, and of course that doesn't it doesn't pan out most of the time. But when I have an idea in my head for a painting, I I try to visualize it. I want it to be the best possible version of of that painting that can be. And I think some of it too is my experience growing up, going to art museums all the time and seeing beautiful work on the wall. It was always really inspiring for me, and it wasn't. I don't think I ever went into a museum thinking that all of that work was somehow magical. I knew it was the result of an artist having a vision and honing it really well, and stretching themselves, and so there's not really a magic element to the great masterworks that you see in museums. It's all the result of things that are accessible to you, building skills, becoming a good self-critic, looking for inspiration, knowing yourself and what will draw the best paintings out of you. um, those are all things that I learned fairly early and was able to implement as I launched my career. And
What
it's still something I think about a lot. I try to be a good self-critic and think through those things with every single painting.
I think that's the hardest thing about painting is being a self-critic.
It is hard. Well, and I think the big problem with it is that we often think of criticism as a negative.
Yeah.
As and I like to encourage my students in workshops to think about it as you having a high ceiling. If you go into a gallery with a lot of paintings by artists you admire, or go into a museum and see master works, um, don't don't think of those things as impossible or unreachable. You have the ability as an artist to keep growing and keep um, improving your skill set, and to paint works like that. I mean, they're not magic. They're the result of things that you can do. And I think that that's what really helps me when I'm thinking about ways of improving, because I don't think of being a good self-critic as beating down on my painting in progress or my skill set. I think of it as, where is there some room for improvement? Oh, I think
All
this
all
brushstroke.
improvement in our
Right.
lives, all the good things that happen to us in our lives are a result of
Exactly.
pain. And if you embrace the pain, which is embracing criticism, because it can be painful, that's important. Now, you mentioned you went to museums a lot. Was there a painting that, maybe when you first went to museums that stood out as something that just completely inspired you, a painting or a particular artist?
I would say there was definitely a particular artist because I remember it well. I may have been 9 or 10 and went to visit my aunt in DC with my mom. And the National Gallery that week was featuring this the big Sargent retrospective in the late 90s that had traveled throughout the US.
Mm.
And I I at that point was painting in watercolor. I had taken lessons from a Latvian artist who was trained in the kind of classic Russian school. And but I'd only done, pencil, charcoal, and watercolor. But I saw those big oil paintings and thought that I really wanted to try it. I love the tactile. Yes, there's one of them. Um, that painting is Glacier Streams, and it's yeah. There are just some amazing paintings you can look up. I would recommend anyone who's following along on the podcast to just spend some time looking at high resolution images of of artists who inspire you. But for me, that was Sargent, and you can find great quality reproductions online. But
Oh,
I remember
Google Arts is the best because they get
art,
them from the museums and they're super, super high res. You can
they're
zoom in on
wonderful.
them, see the brushwork.
Yes.
So there's
So
Sargent. What else?
yes. Well, Sargent was the one that I kind of fell in love with as a, 9 or 10-year-old. And that was before I knew Sargent had kind of seen a new vogue among art students in the US and painters. But I wasn't aware of any of that growing up as a kid in Kentucky. But I knew there was something really special about the the lushness of oil paint and I also liked the idea that I could paint a little bit more freely because I painted really tightly in watercolor. Since if you make a mistake in watercolor, it's there. so so I love the idea of being able to paint with a little bit more flexibility and knowing that I could go back over and correct things or change shapes, adjust values after the fact. And so I switched to oil by the time I was 12. And so I painted in this weekly workshop that my grandmother attended. And that was a special thing too, because she had always encouraged me in my painting as a child. And she had started this art workshop. She started attending it when she was in her 60s. And that was after an entire adult lifetime of really not painting much because
Mm.
she majored in studio art in college, unlike me. But her husband, my grandfather, was very utilitarian. And when they got married and she told him that she wanted to continue painting, he laughed her out of the room. I mean,
Yeah.
he just thought that was absurd and kind of frivolous. And so she stopped painting when she raised my dad and his two siblings. So it wasn't until much later, and after my grandfather retired, that she started painting again. And
Maybe that's what drove you to the attitude you have about not putting
I
your
think
your
she
life
helped
on
with
hold.
that. She did. She was completely dead set on making sure that I could make the most of painting since she really hadn't been given that opportunity.
Now, other inspirations for you?
Yes. Well, I am always drawn to painting water, and that's been kind of a lifelong thing. I've loved traveling and being near water. I recognize that I'm in a very landlocked state right now,
Well,
but
they
I
do have
still
water there.
they do. We have some nice rivers and a couple of reservoirs, but yeah, I do. I love painting the ocean, and so I remember seeing Winslow Homer's High Cliffs of Maine in the National Gallery when I was a
Oh,
kid,
yeah.
and that one stood out too because when you look at that painting or a reproduction of it, um, take note of the texture that you see, and then the way that it's the painting is actually mostly rock, um, and the composition has this really strong diagonal. And strong diagonals in compositions will emphasize movement. They make a more dynamic composition.
Hmm.
And so look at the texture in the rocks if you get a chance to look at that painting. And then also look at the water where Winslow Homer was, like Sargent, would use his brushstrokes to indicate the direction of water flowing off of rock or crashing up or creating mist. And he, like Sargent, used oil paint to the very best of its ability to recreate the feeling of water and rock. And that's something that inspires me because that's a subject that I return to oftentimes. And I love the fact that with oils tactile nature, you can create this feeling of texture and depth and atmosphere in rocks and water.
And okay, so there's Sargent, there's Homer. Anybody else?
Oh, there's so many, too many to count, really. But yes, I love for atmosphere. I love looking at Monet and that the color vibration there too, because I used to be afraid of having big stretches just maybe like a sky gradient in a painting, or, big areas where there wasn't a lot going on. And but when you employ something like color vibration, where you're using two colors that are the same value but slightly different hues next to each other, it creates interest. So you can have a large mass in a painting that is a pretty similar value, but you can still create some dynamism within that by
Yeah, some
using color
pattern.
vibration. Right.
Pattern is so
So
powerful. So I'd just be curious. You started out watercolor. Now you're oil. Have been since you were 12, which
mhm.
means you've been doing it for 10 years. Um,
A little more than that, but
maybe a
who's
touch
counting?
more. Have you tried watercolor since you've got good at oil?
I've gone back a few times for commissions, and then I did a gouache painting last year just to test that out.
Wash is
And
hot.
it
Everybody's doing it.
is, it is. And
Yeah.
it was actually really fun. It was nice to be able to do some of that luminosity that you can achieve in watercolor. That is a
Well,
little
when
bit
I
more of
I
a
I
challenge in
started
oil.
doing a lot of watercolor, because I didn't wanna
Mhm.
be the guy that was hosting a watercolor event and not doing it,
Gotta
and,
practice what you preach. Yeah.
and it's really informed my oil painting a lot, which is really
Mhm.
interesting, as did pastel.
I
So,
bet. Yeah,
it's been a
watercolor
lot
has
of fun.
informed
I'm
mine
just
definitely.
curious how much your watercolor changed. It had to have changed tremendously.
It has, I haven't done enough of it to really see a strong before and after difference, but
Okay, well,
one
we're
thing I
gonna
will
challenge
say.
you to
Okay, I'll
do
I'll do a
one and then
watercolor
let us know how it
poster.
goes. So, tell me about this whole plein air thing. Obviously, we know all about plein air, or we think we do. Um, but you had a choice. You could do studio painting, which most people do, or a lot of people do, and they just do that their whole life. Why plein air?
For me, it was always something that I had done. Before I knew that there was even a resurgence in plein air painting, with Plein Air Painters of America, with the painters in California. A lot of it was more, I guess, located in the Western US. And I grew up as a kid in Kentucky with, I think I had a subscription to American Artist Magazine in the late
Never heard of
90s.
it.
Yep. But apart from that, I really I wasn't all that aware of what was going on.
Yeah.
And so but what I did do was I loved painting in watercolor, and I would frequently take a little watercolor sketchbook and travel kit and paint whenever we went on family vacations. And
Nice.
so I have these little sketchbooks that are full of paintings from when I was, 13, 14, and even earlier. And that was something that I did really regularly. So I started plein air painting well before I knew anything about the events. And so then when I went to college, didn't really pursue anything art career related while I was in college, because that was pretty time consuming in itself. And I majored in history and literature, so not in painting. And it wasn't until I graduated and then had worked in a nonprofit for a year as communications director that I launched my art career on a more full-time basis. And I had at that point just done, I'd mostly done commissions, and then did studio landscape painting. And I realized that when I moved back to Kentucky in 2013, I realized that I needed a community of people around me, because I did not know anyone who painted, and I hadn't really known many people in Boston either, and it was isolating. And I love working with other people. I'm inspired by being around other people, so I knew that I needed a community. So I resubscribed to Planner Magazine and found out about the first Brush with Spring event in New Harmony. It was starting the next day from when the magazine arrived. So
Oh,
I actually got online, registered, and then got up before sunrise the next morning and drove to New Harmony to take part in that event. And I loved it. I mean, it was great to be around other artists. I got some good feedback. It was actually kind of funny. The first painting I did in New Harmony, I set up in this place right on the banks of the river. And about 30 minutes into my painting, a group of people started pouring out of this barn, that glorified barn building that was not too far from my painting location. And then this guy comes up behind me and starts to comment on my painting, and he's being really nice. But I turn around and it's Kwang Ho, and he looks at me and he said, "Oh, you're not in my workshop." So it turns out that Kwang Ho's workshop was going out to paint, and I happened to be right there. But yeah, that was my first plein air event experience. And I loved it. I mean, I learned a lot from it. My paintings weren't that great. So so it was good
Well,
to.
I think that's that's an important thing to
Mhm.
make sure everybody understands
Oh,
is
yeah.
that, you know, one of the most freeing days for me, a moment was I was on the phone with Richard Schmid and he was lamenting about this painting that he had just botched. And I was so happy to hear that. I thought I was the only one. And so it's nice to know that people like you had to go through some struggle
Oh, for sure.
and everybody goes through it. It's just it's again, it's embracing the pain. You just got to get a lot of mileage.
Definitely.
So you did this whole project, which was a solo focus on waterfalls. Tell me
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, that was my solo show that opened, September 1st of last year
Has it been a
at.
year already? Wow.
Yeah, believe it or not. Almost, well, a half a year, I guess. But yeah, I opened that in Montana at FOR Fine Art in Whitefish. And when they offered me a slot for a solo show, and I didn't have a ton of work already on hand, because of moving. I tried to sell most of the inventory that I had or ship it off to other galleries. And so I had kind of this blank slate where I could start with a unified theme. And I went over a few different options, but I decided to actually keep it subject related. And I knew that would be a challenge because when you're looking at making, 15 to 25 paintings, it's a little hard to stick on the same subject, when you're when you're creating a wider body of work. But I thought it would be a fun challenge, and I did think that waterfalls were ideally suited to that because they are value studies. I mean, any waterfall that you paint, unless it's just a minor feature in a much larger landscape, is going to be about rocks and water. And so you're looking at shades of gray mostly and brown, some of these more neutral tones. And then what I do with that is it does give me a chance to focus a lot more on design because I can move rocks around, I can change things. No one will really know or care, if some of that gets adjusted for a painting. And then I get to be selective about where I choose to put highlights, where I choose to put some areas with color. And that's often when sun goes through mist. If sunlight's hitting a waterfall, then you'll see some rainbow effects where sun is filtering through mist. And you can choose to amplify some of those colors. And so I got to do a lot of that and look at different dimensions, different areas, different waterfall subjects. And yeah, I loved the challenge of creating. I think I ended up with like 25 paintings of the same subject, but really varied work just because of choosing different dimensions, choosing, to, in some cases, zoom way in on a waterfall and then also paint one from a distance and,
Well, I know
incorporate.
you did a waterfall video with us for
Yes.
painttube.tv last year, but for the people who haven't had the benefit of being able to watch that, what what would you say are 2 or 3 things to think about when you're painting waterfalls? Because I find them, at least before your video, incredibly difficult. Because my
Yes.
tendency is to put all this white paint and streak it down, and then it just doesn't look right.
Yes. Well, on that note, I would say the first thing I would tell people is to reserve your highlights because when you look at a waterfall, you are seeing a lot of gray, and the highlights only come in a few select places where you see that white that might be tinted slightly warm or slightly cool depending on the overall light of the day. And so reserve those highlights for the places that really need it. And then you can only do this when you're plein air painting. A photo will totally flatten out color in a waterfall. It'll look like gray. But if you're in person, look for shifts in color. Where do you see some warmth? Is there a section that is, where say you're looking at a waterfall in sunlight on a day that, where the sky is clear. And what you'll notice is that there will be areas where the light is, or the highlights are really warm, where the sunlight is pouring through mist and then hitting, the water cascading over a rock. But then there also will be areas of shadow formed by rocks and water, where things will shift cool. So you might see more blues, more violets, even some deep blue greens, depending on where you are. And look for those color shifts. And if you're painting on location, if you have a chance to, then make note of those color shifts when you're painting, and you can carry that information back into the studio, because that's something where your photos will probably not capture it. I've always found that photos fall a little bit short with waterfalls, especially in sunlight, because they get overexposed. There's just too
Right.
much, too dramatic a value shift for a camera to capture all of that
Good
effectively.
advice. So you recently, I don't know how recently, but the last couple of years, I suppose, you were nominated and brought into the Plein Air Painters of America, and that's a pretty big deal.
I was not expecting that. I got a call, I think it was early last February, and they invited me in. So that was a huge honor because I did grow up following American Artist Magazine and the first iteration of Plein Air. And I remember seeing a lot of the Papa artists featured in Plein Air. So to be part of that group is a big honor.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, what's in store for this year for you?
Well, it'll be a little bit different. So I usually try to pick about 5 or 6 plein air events and then teach a couple of workshops. But this year we are actually expecting twins
Oh
in
boy.
May. so, so it could I had to cancel a few things. I had to cancel on Maui, which was really a gut punch, and then also on Forgotten Coast, which is one of my favorite events, and that one takes place in Florida. And Door County. I mean, I had to make a lot of phone calls.
Yeah, you're going to be a pretty busy person.
Yes.
As the
So
father of triplets, I can relate.
you can in a way that few people can. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise to find that out. But what I'm looking forward to doing some more studio work. I've actually missed Aspen season, both falls that I've been in Colorado, because October is kind of a big month for plein air events with
Yeah,
Laguna and
yeah.
then Texas. And yeah, so I had ended up not seeing aspens really in Colorado. So this year my goal is to make sure I get to see that. Um, Yes, and and just to enjoy having two small babies. I don't think it's really sunk in. I think it won't happen until they arrive. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing two more kids unpack the world, and that's eye
Well,
opening.
you're up for the task. If anybody can handle it, you can.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
that's
more studio painting, and then I have two solo shows. So everything is happening in twos this year.
oh
But
wow.
so yeah, I have one coming up in Edmonds, Washington at the Cole Gallery, and that's going to focus more on coastal work, and I'll do some mountain paintings. And then I'm really excited about doing a series of Texas paintings for a gallery in Santa Fe, McClary Fine Art.
Gallery
So
where?
in Santa Fe on
Oh, in
Canyon
Santa
Road.
Fe. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes. So yeah, that'll be nice. And living in Colorado Springs, I only have to drive 4 hours to Santa Fe. So it's one of those rare shows that I get by with driving work and not shipping everything, which,
Yeah.
as all of you know, is a hassle. So,
So give everybody a little bit of a feel for what that is like. I don't think anybody really understands what goes into preparing for a plein air event. It's not just a matter of showing up.
oh right, it is a lot more than that. Yes. So most of the ones that I do require a flight now because, if it's closer than 15, 16 hours, then it might be worth driving to spare the hassle of shipping and renting a car. Um, but yeah, most of the ones that I do, I fly to, and you have to, obviously book travel, find a rental car that'll work for a painting event, which, I maybe some people get by with a sedan, but I usually have to have an SUV or hatchback at least. And then you also have to ship frames and all your supplies ahead of time. So that really does add a lot of time. I've gotten it down to a little bit more of a system where I will usually ship panels directly from Jerry's Artorama to either my host home or the whoever's organizing the event, and that's cheaper because they ship for free.
Yeah.
And then I will sometimes order frames from them. Sometimes these events will have a framer, like JFM in Atlanta, and sometimes they'll have them on location to sell
Yeah.
frames, and that's really helpful. But if
Yeah.
they don't, then you also have to ship frames ahead of time. And the trick is making sure that your panels line up with your frames. So I always make a note, I'll write out which frames I'm packing, and I
Yeah. I
try to
guess you don't want to get there and have the wrong frames for the wrong panels.
exactly, and that's happened to
Yeah.
all of us, but I try
Well, and
to
you've also got to
minimize the
be
likelihood.
prepared. You got to put hanging wires and all that nonsense on them.
Exactly. Yep.
A lot of
So
work.
it's a lot.
So
Yeah.
Kathleen, in the interest of since our time is going to run out so
Yes.
quickly, lightning round, a couple of tips. Um, Tips on painting skies.
Yes. Well, with skies, I love doing a transparent wash underneath and kind of figuring out what my composition will be because skies are a great chance to get pretty get creative on the composition. Nobody knows what position a cloud was in, and no one cares that it's accurate to your photograph, so you can design a cloud however you want. And so I love getting really creative with skies. So
I should mention that you have a video, one called Clouds and Distance,
mhm,
and one called Creating Dramatic Atmosphere in Landscapes.
that's right.
Both
And
of
then the
those are,
waterfall one is coming out, I believe, this month,
yep,
so that
yep.
one that one's going to be a
So these are all at painttube.tv and which you can watch on your big screen on the app.
mhm.
Um, okay. In terms of color relationships, any ideas or thoughts on color?
Oh, this is a broad one.
I know it's hard to simplify these
It
things.
is. Well, I think I would just go back and remind people that color is still secondary to value. So make sure that your values are correct. I start off almost every painting with a transparent value study underneath. And that includes plein air work. If I'm painting outdoors with Gamsol and go really thinly, using a method that I demonstrate in those videos, then it sets up enough that I can paint right on top of it. So I start off everything with the value underpainting, and that way it frees me to play more with color.
And it does all the
And
heavy lifting for you.
yes, and then my other thing would be pre-mix your color on your palette. If you find you're having trouble with color harmony, you can limit. You can use a limited palette. I tend to not do that because I love working with a wider array of pigments. But I can harmonize my colors by pre-mixing them and making sure they look like they're well harmonized on the palette. And if my paint mixes look well harmonized on the palette, they'll work on the painting. So that's
That's
that's the other
great
tip.
advice. Well, Kathleen, our time went by far too quickly, but thank you so much. Good luck with the twins. Good luck on your twin shows, and good luck on the release of the new watercolor video. And thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much, Eric.
All right, take care. All right, that is Kathleen Hudson, and her website is KathleenBHudson.com. Her Facebook is KB Hudson Studio, and her Instagram is Kathleen Hudson. That has been a lot of fun. Okay, so are you guys ready to improve your art sales for 2023? It's time for the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
I answer your art marketing questions. You can upload a video question at artmarketing.com/questions, or you can email me, eric@artmarketing.com. Hamadine, my producer, um, is going to read the first question. Last time we did a podcast, you were sick, so I guess you're better now.
I feel better, thank you.
Okay.
So the first question is from Jennifer from Jackson, Michigan. I'm learning and working on my craft. How do I go about building relationships with galleries in the meantime? I don't have any current connections to the art world, and I am wondering where to put my best efforts now so that it might make it easier and quicker for me to get established with quality galleries when I'm ready. And any tips on what makes a quality galleries would also be helpful.
All right, that's a great question, Jennifer. Congratulations. Um, I've got a lot of different conflicting thoughts on this, but let me just say something. I think that uh, life is about a long game, not a short game. And one of the things that happens, somebody I haven't heard from in 6 years contacts me and needs something, and it just feels a little like abuse. And I'm happy to do it if I can. But if they were somebody who touched base once or twice a year, and I got to know them a little bit better, then when they call and ask for something, it just feels a little better. So, in terms of having a perspective of looking in advance, you're playing a long game. Um, and so I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I just want to caution you and everybody else listening. You're a new artist. You're getting to the point where you're just learning and you're growing as an artist. And I wouldn't really worry or even be thinking so much about gallery contacts right now. You need to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to get your artwork to a point where it is worth showing. And I don't mean to be rude. It may be worth it now, but we all have a tendency to fall in love with our work before other people do. Most important thing you can do is get your work to a quality level that is worthy of being sold, and getting some feedback from others on the outside who aren't going to tell you lies, so that you can know when you're really ready to sell your work. Now, if you want to develop relationships with galleries in the meantime, I think it's okay. But galleries have their radar up all the time, because artists are always dropping in, and what do they really want? Well, they really want to be in the gallery. So galleries get inundated with emails and packages and pictures and visits, and they get very busy doing that stuff, and they don't have time to do what they need to do. So you don't necessarily need to do that now. If you want to establish friendships, get to know them, I think it's great. Can't hurt to get to know some gallery people. But I don't recommend being the artist who is only trying to get them to look at your work. As a matter of fact, it can hurt you if it's too soon, because that might mark you in their eyes, right? So I made the mistake. I contacted this gallery one time, and I thought I had just done the best piece of work I'd ever done in my life. This is a long time ago. And so I thought, well, this gallery really should carry my work. So rather than being direct about it, I called the guy and I said, "Hey, listen, would you be willing to critique one of my paintings for me?" And he said, "Sure." And then once he got it, he was not very complimentary. As a matter of fact, he told the truth, which I needed to hear. And it turned out what I thought was a good painting was not, in his eyes, a good painting. And that was a very important thing for me to learn. But my hidden motive there was to try to secretly get him to say, "Oh, I love your painting. I want to put it in my gallery." And of course, they're onto that because everybody's done that. So it didn't work out that way. So I kind of marked myself, and that created a little bit of a negative, I suppose. So I don't do it till you're ready, and and then be careful about how you approach them. The goal, and I teach this in my book. The goal is to get them to invite you, not for you to push yourself on them. And as a sales trainer and person, I my tendency is to want to push, but pull marketing is a lot more effective. If you get to a position of selling your art, um, then you're going to learn a lot more about what it's going to take. So one of the things you could do is you could drop into a local gallery if you have time on your hands, and you could say, listen, I'm an artist. I'm not going to show you my work because my work's not ready yet, but I would love to learn more about art, and I'd be willing to volunteer here, helping you hang paintings or helping you sell or helping you do anything. I don't need any money for it. And I am never going to talk to your clients about my art. I'm not going to talk to you about my art. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to show it to you because it's just not ready yet. And if you volunteer and you say, "Hey, I'd love to work," you're going to learn so much because you're going to encounter what they go through. And artists think that galleries don't do anything, and they complain about how much percentage they're taking. And they do so much. They do so much more than anybody ever even can possibly anticipate. And understanding that will help you, understanding what they go through to chase clients down to get them to buy something, understanding how people respond to artwork when they're looking at it, and how to answer questions, that will help you a lot. So the other thing is your taste will change. Most of us, when we first start painting, paint very, we try to paint very tight, very photographically, oftentimes, and our colors tend to be garish, and there's a lot of things that will probably change as your taste develops, and you have to develop taste. And the way to develop taste is to be around a really good gallery. Now, you might go into a gallery that you think has good taste. 5 years from now, you might think they don't have good taste. That's happened to me. I have paintings that I bought, 25 years ago that I don't like anymore because at the time I thought they were good paintings, but now I look at them and say, not so great. Um, but I think that if you develop taste, that will help you more than anything else. It'll help you make your paintings better. And the way to develop taste is go to galleries, go to art shows, go to museums, study the art, find out what it is that you really respond to, which artist you respond to, what style, what color palettes, what moods, so that you find things that um, really work for you. That's going to help you a lot. I'd also recommend that learning about art is really critical. And I have become one of these guys. I read every art novel, I buy every art book. Sometimes people send them to me. I just constantly in consuming things, not only looking at the pictures, but reading the articles. And I read incessantly. I read Fine Art Connoisseur, read Plein Air, I read my competitors, a lot of other things. But, um, you know, you want to just really get to a point where you really understand art in a bigger way. And so that's all about developing yourself. So, anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Next question.
The second question is from Glenn from Palmdale, California. Here's one I get multiple times every semester from my student. What advice would you give to an art student between 18 and 24 years old, graduating from junior college or four-year college, just starting out for the first?
That's a great question. And that's from Glenn Knowles. And Glenn is a brilliant teacher and a brilliant artist. And we got to know each other when he came on one of my painting trips to Cuba. What a great guy he is. And it's a really terrific question. And he knows him because he's been teaching for a long, long time. So, um, so what happens is that young people will go to art school and they'll be all enthusiastic and they'll learn about how to create really beautiful artwork. And then they graduate from school and then the struggle hits. And the struggle can really beat you down. The struggle beats down a lot of people and they end up not doing what they love and they end up taking a job doing something else because of pressure from family or parents or something, and they fail. So let me ask you this question, which is better, failing or learning about the art business? You see, if you learn about the art business, you're going to increase your chances of success, and that's going to help you a lot of ways. I have said to friends of mine that own art schools and ateliers, I will voluntarily uh, come over and teach a class on art marketing, or I will happily create a course on art marketing. And if you would require your students to watch it, and the response is, well, that's not what we do. Well, the problem is, it's put yourself in a different world. Any school, let's say it's medical school, they teach you how to be a doctor, but they don't teach you how to run your doctor business, and that's something that should be part of the curricula. You want to be learning these things. So here's what I'm going to tell you. It's not what people want to hear, um, but the type of person who becomes an artist doesn't want to do business, but they want to sell their paintings. But if you're selling anything, whether it's paintings or heroin, I don't recommend that. You're in business. You're selling something. So you need to invest in yourself, in your education. And I highly recommend you do it while you're in art school because you have free time on your hands, maybe, and start reading. Um, read everything you can get your hands on. Now, my best advice is, what they call make your bed every morning. And there's a whole book about that. Really, what it means is have discipline. You want the discipline of being a full-time business artist, meaning you paint your creativity, you paint what you love, you paint what you think is going to be what people want, but you also have to spend time, I think 20% of your week, one day a week focusing on your art marketing. And then, there's other things like planning and bookkeeping and scheduling and strategy and all of that other stuff. So you need to study it. And the way to study it is to read books. I have artmarketing.com, which has hundreds of articles on it for free. I've got books out, I've got videos out, and there are lots of other people who teach marketing. I recommend you don't focus on things that teach art marketing, even though that's what I do. I recommend you take a course in small business. Uh, think about reading some books on small business. Read some books on mindset. Mindset is critical. Start with Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and read it once every couple of years the rest of your life. I need to do that. That's a reminder. Um, it's very important to understand that these things influence you, but you got to go to work every day, you know, rather than staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning and getting up at noon and going and painting again. Set yourself on a schedule so that you can do normal business, so that you can be there available for calls with clients and galleries and things like that. Set a schedule of painting time, set a schedule of work time, planning time, all of those things. It'll make a big difference. Now, I did a video about goal setting, which I put on Instagram around right before the beginning of the year. You can find that at Eric Rhodes on Instagram. You've got to have goals. You've got to break your goals out monthly, and I think you got to break out your goals weekly, and you need to make them measurable, meaning you can tell when you've achieved them. A goal might be a dollar amount, a goal might be getting, 10 certain things done. You want a measurable. And I recommend, especially on the financial side, check your goals every single week. So let me give an example. Now, I just wrote an article about this in the Oil Painters of America newsletter, which you can find online. Um, and this video that I just did. But think about it this way. Let's say I'm going to use round numbers that are easy. Let's say that you wanted to make $10,000 a month. So how do you do that? Well, you break it down into $2,500 every week. That's, let's say an average 4-week month. Then you break it down into $500 every day. And then you have to have that discipline of, if I'm going to survive, I have to make $500 today. Now, if you make $1,000 today, that buys you an extra day. But if you fall behind, you got to make it up. And if you give yourself that kind of a discipline, it'll make all the difference in the world. I hate that kind of stuff, but you got to do it. And it's running a business. And I have a friend that's a gallery owner, or was. His salespeople have a certain amount of money they have to bring in every single day, and he checks with them. And if they don't, he gives them a hard time because that's how he makes his numbers. You got to give yourself a hard time. If you can't be accountable, get somebody to make you accountable. I have an accountability group. I'm at a board. I have a board of directors. I have to go meet with them quarterly. And if I miss my numbers, they give me a hard time. And they should, because I shouldn't miss my numbers. And they give me advice and they give me help. And it's always good to get outside advice from people who know how to do this stuff. If you have a partner, a husband, a wife, a spouse, a friend who you can say, look, I have to make $500 every single week. I want you to check in with me once a week and see how I'm doing. And when you know they're going to do that, it's kind of like working out, right? If you have a trainer who checks in with you every day and says, did you do your sit-ups? You're not going to want to lie to him. So you're going to do your sit-ups. It's the same thing. So accountability. The world that you live in kind of revolves around social media, gaming, things like that. You have to ask yourself, where am I spending my time? Is it helping or hurting? Is it helping my attitude? Is it actually helping me sell my art, or is it not? You know, not everybody's world is about the same things your world is about. And if you want to sell art, you need to know that there are many, many tools in many, many places. And it's not all about what you think is cool. And those things are cool. But just because you're spending all your time on TikTok doesn't mean that everybody who's going to buy art is. You need to be every place that you possibly can be that has what I call concentrated art audiences, right? Concentrated art audiences would be like Fine Art Connoisseur, which I have all these billionaires and multimillionaires who buy a lot of expensive art, and they're all art lovers and they all like the kind of representational art that's in there. And so when you're advertising there, you increase your odds rather than just putting it out on, anywhere, right? So think about those things. Listen to your customers, find out what they want. They will tell you exactly what they need, and listen and try to do those things. Those are some core principles. There's a lot of other things, but most importantly, discipline and study. Now, study is a lifetime thing. I have kids, and one of my kids is like, I hate to read. I read almost every single night. I listen to podcasts almost every single day when I'm working out in the morning. I buy courses. I join organizations so I can learn more. I am constantly learning, and I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And if you imagine yourself standing on a dock in front of the ocean, and you're looking out over the ocean and the sky, and above the sky, that's how much there is to learn out there. You got to just constantly be learning, especially if you want to stay ahead in life. And if you want to be a successful art business person, then that's what it takes. Sorry. I know you don't want to hear that. Anyway, that is today's, on that positive note, that is today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
This has been a really fun time today. Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to remind you guys to join us at the Plein Air Convention in May. Go to Watercolor Live coming up in a couple of weeks, and make sure you get a subscription to Plein Air magazine. If you've not seen my blog where I talk about stuff that really is about stuff my kids need to know, things like ethics and the way to operate on life, it's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com and subscribe for free. I'm told there are hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but I don't know. I don't count. Also, I'm on the air daily on Facebook. My show is called Art School Live, and it's there every day, 12 noon Eastern, and you can subscribe for free on YouTube. We just hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's pretty cool. Thank you for that. And get your subscription. And also follow me, please. Please, I beg you. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, Eric Rhodes, at Eric Rhodes. And that's me, Eric Rhodes, publisher of Plein Air magazine. Thank you for reading it. Thank you for your time today. And remember, it's a big world out there, and it's time to go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@plenairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 Plein Air Painting Tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at plenairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.